Subscribe for more mysteries, unsolved and unexplained.
Let's dive right into this. Welcome to a brand new explainer, where we're going to unpack the only unsolved case of air piracy in commercial aviation history. It is a story that literally sounds like a Hollywood script, taking us from a daring mid-air heist to the microscopic forensic clues left behind. We're going to break down exactly how one man hijacked a commercial airliner, extorted a massive ransom, and then, well, vanished into thin air. The tension on Northwest Orient Flight 305 started out incredibly quietly. Picture this. It's Thanksgiving Eve 1971. A polite, impeccably dressed man in a dark suit catches the eye of a 23-year-old flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. Now, assuming he was just a lonely businessman slipping her his phone number, she dropped the folded note right into her purse without even looking at it. But then, he leaned in and whispered these chilling words. "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." So here is the face of the man who became known to the world as D.B. Cooper. He'd actually bought his ticket under the alias Dan Cooper. He just calmly sat there in seat 18E in the very last row of the Boeing 727, ordered a bourbon and 7-Up, and when the flight attendant came back, he just opened his briefcase. Right inside, she saw a large battery wired to rows of red cylinders that looked exactly like dynamite. And the craziest part? He wasn't frantic at all. He was remarkably composed. What's truly fascinating is the actual passenger ticket he used, which the FBI somehow managed to recover. He bought this simple one-way ticket from Portland to Seattle for just $20, and he paid for the whole thing in cash. Very shortly after takeoff, with the bomb threat officially established, Cooper laid out his incredibly precise, high-stakes demands to the flight crew. He demanded $200,000 in negotiable American currency. And to put that into perspective for you, that's equivalent to about $1.6 million today. But he didn't just want the cash. He specifically demanded 4 parachutes, 2 main back parachutes and 2 reserve front parachutes. Now, this was an absolutely brilliant tactical move. By asking for 4, he strongly implied to the authorities on the ground that he might take hostages with him, which pretty much guaranteed they wouldn't risk giving him sabotaged or dummy equipment. Let's look at how this escalated. Flight 305 was supposed to be a super quick 30-minute hop. Instead, to keep the 36 passengers totally calm and completely unaware of the hijacking, the crew announced they were experiencing a, quote, minor mechanical difficulty. They put the plane into a holding pattern, just circling Puget Sound for 2 agonizing hours. And while the passengers just sat there quietly, the FBI and local police were frantically scrambling on the ground in Seattle to scrape together the cash and track down those parachutes. Once they finally landed in Seattle, Cooper actually kept his word. He exchanged the passengers for a 19-pound canvas bag packed with 10,000 $20 bills and the 4 parachutes. Then, keeping only a skeleton crew on board, he directed the pilots to take off again, this time heading south toward Mexico City. But mid-flight, he did the unthinkable. Cooper lowered the Boeing 727's rear air stair right out into the open sky. Just think about the conditions he was facing for a second. They were 10,000 feet up in the air. The plane was cruising at 185 kilometers per hour. It was -9 degrees Celsius outside. He plunged into a freezing, rain-swept, totally moonless night over the dense, rugged woods of Washington state. And remember, he wasn't wearing some kind of specialized survival gear here. He jumped wearing a business suit, a trench coat, and slip-on loafers. It is a leap that has absolutely baffled investigators for decades. Section 1. The forensic evidence, baffling clues left behind. So, the crucial takeaway here is that while Cooper seemingly vanished into the stormy night, he didn't disappear without leaving physical evidence behind in seat 19E. Let's talk about his most famous piece of left-behind evidence, a simple, black JCPenney clip-on tie. Decades later, a group of citizen sleuths using advanced electron microscopy analyzed this very tie, and what they found was just astounding. It wasn't just dusty, it was covered in microscopic chemical and organic anomalies. We're talking pharmaceutical spores, bismuth, antimony, and rare earth elements that paint a highly specific picture of where this guy might have spent his days. And this next detail brilliantly illustrates his potential background. They found particles of unalloyed titanium. Now, in 1971, titanium wasn't used in everyday items like it is today. It was a highly specialized, rare metal used primarily in cutting-edge aerospace manufacturing. This strongly suggests Cooper wasn't just some random street criminal. He was likely someone with access to advanced 1970s manufacturing, maybe an engineer or a manager at a Boeing contractor or even a chemical plant. Then there's the whole mystery of the parachutes. The FBI heavily scrutinized what he took and what he left behind. Get this, Of the 4 chutes provided, he left a perfectly good, steerable sporting parachute right there on the plane. Instead, he chose to jump with a military-style, unsteerable rig. On top of that, he took a dummy training parachute that was actually sewn shut, which he ended up cutting apart to secure the money bag. The FBI concluded that a truly experienced skydiver probably wouldn't have made these choices, especially when jumping out into a pitch-black storm. Section 2. The missing ransom money. So the FBI searched the woods of Washington for years without finding a thing. But a totally chance discovery almost a decade later would fundamentally shift the entire investigation.
Fast forward to February 1980. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family along the Columbia River at a spot called Tina Bar. While he was raking the sandy riverbank to build a simple little campfire, his tool hit something buried in the sand. He unearthed 3 decaying rubber-banded packets of $20 bills. The FBI checked the serial numbers and, you guessed it, it was a direct match. It was D.B. Cooper's ransom money.
But out of that massive $200,000, only $5,800 was actually recovered. And here is where the science gets completely fascinating. Recent biological analysis of microscopic diatoms, which are essentially tiny algae, found on those bills suggests something incredible. The specific springtime diatoms indicate the money wasn't buried there on the cold November night of the jump. It actually entered the water months later. How it got there? Well, that remains one of the greatest mysteries of the whole case. Section 3. Copycats and the legacy of Flight 305. The sheer audacity of Cooper's heist immediately spawned a wave of imitators attempting to cash in on his mid-air extortion strategy. One of the most famous copycats was a guy named Richard McCoy. Just months after Cooper, McCoy successfully hijacked a plane in Utah, jumped out with a $500,000 ransom, and actually survived. Some people even suspected McCoy was D.B. Cooper pulling a second heist, but the FBI ultimately ruled him out. McCoy was only 29, he had prominent ears that didn't match the sketch at all, and unlike Cooper, McCoy left his fingerprints everywhere and was caught pretty quickly. Ultimately, Cooper's crime exposed a massive, glaring vulnerability in commercial aviation. He used the Boeing 727 specifically because its rear stairs could be lowered while the plane was airborne, a feature originally designed for easy boarding at smaller airports. Airlines quickly realized this was a massive liability and disabled the feature with an external aerodynamic locking mechanism. To this day, that simple physical lock is famously known in the aviation industry as the Cooper vein. And the legacy of this crime? It directly affects you every single time you fly today. The rash of 1972 copycats inspired by Cooper really forced the FAA's hand. They had to immediately implement the mandatory metal detectors and manual bag checks that we all just consider a standard part of traveling now. Before D.B. Cooper, you could essentially walk straight off the street and onto an airplane with a briefcase full of dynamite. He literally changed airport security forever. The FBI officially suspended the active investigation in 2016, leaving us with the ultimate question. Did D.B. Cooper walk out of those woods, a rich man who pulled off the perfect heist, and sleep in his own bed that night? Or did the freezing wilderness, the pitch-black sky, and his slip-on shoes claim his life and scatter his ransom to the winds? We may never know for sure, but the clues left behind guarantee we're going to keep asking.